I used to think that hard work was the key to success. Show up early. Stay late. Keep your head down. Do the work, and eventually, the results would speak for themselves. I believed that with every ounce of my being. So much so that I ignored all the warning signs around me. And trust me, there were plenty of them. It all started about 3 years ago when I was 24, freshly graduated from university with a marketing degree and a head full of big ideas. My dream was to work in a company that would value my skills and give me the chance to prove myself. I landed a junior strategist role at a mid-sized firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a great opportunity. I figured if I worked hard enough, I could rise quickly. The kind of place where if you proved yourself, you could move up. I was hungry for success, so I went in with the mindset that I would outwork everyone around me. I would be the one they noticed. And the results would follow. That's when I met Greg. He was my manager. The office favorite. The kind of guy everyone seemed to love. Always smiling, always upbeat, and seemingly perfect in every way. He had the slicked back hair, the gold watch, and the swagger of someone who had never faced a real challenge in their life. Greg was the kind of person who could do no wrong in the eyes of others. From the moment I joined the team, Greg took an interest in me. He would always say things like, "You're sharp, I like that, and stick with me, kid, and I'll show you how things work around here." I thought it was genuine. I thought he saw potential in me, and that maybe I was lucky to have a mentor like him. At first, I appreciated the attention. He'd invite me to meetings, ask for my input on pitches, and even speak highly of me to other people in the office. I felt like I was on the fast track to success. Greg had the connections, the knowledge, and the status that could propel me forward. But slowly, things started to change. It wasn't long before I started noticing a few red flags. Small things at first, things I tried to brush off. But the more I worked with Greg, the more these patterns began to emerge. It all began with a campaign strategy I'd put together for a fashion retail client. The brief was simple enough: a fresh, interactive marketing plan that leaned into influencer partnerships, something our company hadn't explored before. I worked on it all weekend, putting together a proposal I was genuinely proud of. I thought it had potential to be the best campaign we'd done all year. Monday morning, I walked into the office, excited to show Greg what I had worked on. I handed it over with a proud smile, hoping he'd appreciate the effort I'd put into it. He looked it over briefly, nodded, and said, "I'll polish it and send it to the director." I didn't think anything of it at the time. It seemed like a normal reaction. After all, Greg had more experience. Maybe it just needed a few tweaks before it could go to the higher-ups. I figured that was fine. I was still new, and I trusted his judgment. This is where it starts to get complicated. Later that week, I overheard Greg presenting my campaign strategy to the director and the rest of the team. But there was something that made my stomach drop. He was presenting it like it was his own work. Not even a mention of me. Not even a footnote with my name on it. I was confused. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Surely, it was an oversight, right? Greg had a lot on his plate. He was presenting to important people. Maybe he just forgot to give credit where it was due. That's what I told myself. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But then, it happened again. And again. Client after client, pitch after pitch, I noticed the same thing. I would work long hours on something, put my heart into it, and Greg would give me praise privately. "Great job, kid. This is brilliant. You're going places." But in every meeting, every report, every review, Greg was the one getting credit. Not once did he acknowledge me publicly. It was like my work didn't exist. At first, I didn't say anything. I figured I was still too new to make a fuss. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be recognized yet. Maybe I just needed to wait my turn. But the more it happened, the more it started to eat at me. It felt like a slap in the face every time. Finally, I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I had to bring it up to Greg. So, I went to him one day and asked, "Hey Greg, I noticed my name wasn't on the latest pitch deck. Should I be adding it in the final drafts?" He chuckled, looking at me like I was being paranoid. "Nah, don't worry about that. We're a team. The higher-ups know who's involved." I didn't buy it. I didn't feel like it was a team effort when I was doing all the work and he was the one reaping the rewards. But I was still new, still unsure of how to handle it. I didn't want to cause a scene. That's when things took a turn. The big pitch was coming up, a huge opportunity for the company, a massive electronics brand looking to overhaul their online presence. This could mean 6 figures in revenue, possibly even more. It was the biggest pitch of the quarter, and Greg asked me to take the lead on the strategy. Of course, I jumped at the chance. I knew this was my moment to shine. If I nailed this pitch, I'd prove my worth, not just to Greg, but to the entire company. I worked nonstop for nearly 3 weeks. Late nights. Weekends. I even built a full interactive prototype and analytics projections. This wasn't just another deck. This was my chance to show everyone what I could really do. The night before the pitch, I sent Greg the final version of the presentation. It was polished, professional, and ready to go. I even included a brief message. All set for tomorrow's pitch. Let me know if I'm presenting or assisting. Greg replied promptly. Great job. I'll take point. You'll be in the room, of course. I figured that was fair. He was the senior strategist, after all. I'd expected him to lead the presentation. But I still wanted to be in the room, to be there when the client saw my work, to at least be recognized for my effort. This was my moment. But that night, something didn't sit right with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I wasn't sure why, but I decided to check the shared folder where we kept all the presentation files. It was a bit of a gamble, but I wanted to be sure everything was in order. What I found made my stomach drop. Greg had uploaded a new file. It was my version of the pitch, but there was something glaringly wrong. Something I hadn't noticed before. My name was gone. Every slide, every piece of work I had painstakingly put together, was there, but instead of my name, my bio, and my contact info, Greg's name was now on every slide. He had scrubbed my identity out of the entire presentation. He was going to present my work as his own. I sat there in disbelief, staring at the screen. How could he do this? After everything? It wasn't just a mistake anymore, it was deliberate. He had planned this. And now, he was going to take credit for my work in front of the entire client team, in front of everyone who mattered. But here's the thing, this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I had learned from my previous experiences. I had been naive before, but not anymore. I was ready. I stayed up that night, stewing over what I was going to do. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let him steal my work again. I had to make sure that when the client saw the presentation, they knew exactly who was behind it. I decided to take action. I wasn't about to let Greg's manipulation slide any longer. I knew I needed to cover my tracks. So, I sent an email directly to the client's representative. I used my work account, so it would look official, and I attached the latest version of the presentation. But I didn't just send the file. I added a message, making sure they knew exactly what had been happening behind the scenes. Hi, client's name, just in case there's a tech hiccup tomorrow, here's a backup of the final presentation I've been leading the last few weeks. Looking forward to the meeting. It was subtle, but it was enough. The client now had the true version of the work, with my name attached to it, and I was confident it would come up in the meeting. The next morning, Greg was practically glowing. He was walking around the office like he'd already won. He had that cocky smile on his face, and he looked ready to deliver the pitch of his career. He walked into the boardroom like he owned the place, adjusting his flashy tie and cufflinks. I stayed back, sitting on the other side of the glass wall, sipping my coffee. I could see Greg in the meeting, standing confidently in front of the client. But as much as I tried to keep my emotions in check, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction creeping in. I knew I'd made the right choice by sending that email. It was out of my hands now. The client had the truth. My phone buzzed, and I glanced down at the screen. It was a message from the client's rep. Thank you for the clarification. We'd like to speak with you after the meeting, privately. I tried to keep a neutral expression. It was clear what had happened. The client had seen through Greg's lies. They knew the real story. And I was about to find out just how far Greg had gone in trying to take credit for my work. I didn't hear from Greg again for the next 30 minutes. He was in the meeting, doing his best to sell my work as his own. But the client wasn't buying it. I knew that much. The fact that they wanted to speak with me privately confirmed that. When Greg finally came out of the boardroom, he looked the same as always, calm, collected, and confident. But I could see the slight unease in his eyes. Something had changed. He strutted past me, not saying a word. I didn't acknowledge him either. I had more important things to worry about. 2 hours later, Greg was called into the director's office. When he came out, his usual swagger was gone. His shoulders were slumped, and his face had turned pale. He walked right past me again, this time without even looking in my direction. A few hours later, I was asked to join a client call. But here's the kicker, Greg wasn't invited. The client had asked for me specifically, not him. It was a surreal feeling, sitting on that call. The client was impressed by my work, by the effort I had put into the pitch, and by how I had handled the situation. They offered me a position right then and there. Not just any position, a lead strategist role. Full creative authority. 6-figure salary. It was everything I'd worked for and more. The client had been blown away by my professionalism and my skill. They said they'd never seen anyone handle the situation with so much poise and clarity. I didn't need to think twice. I accepted. As for Greg? Well, things didn't go as smoothly for him. After the client submitted both versions of the pitch, the one with my name and the one Greg had tried to pass off as his, the company had no choice but to open an investigation into what had happened. Word got around quickly that Greg had been taking credit for work that wasn't his, misrepresenting the team's contributions, and manipulating situations to his advantage. HR didn't waste any time. They launched a full inquiry, and it didn't take long for them to uncover the extent of his behavior. This wasn't just a one-off incident. Greg had been doing this for years, taking other people's work, scrubbing their names off it, and presenting it as his own. The man who had always looked so polished, so confident, had been built on a foundation of lies and stolen credit. And then, just like that, it was over for him. Greg was terminated. The rest of the office was in shock, but I can't say I was. I had seen the signs for months, even if I had been too naive to recognize them at first. I felt a strange sense of closure after that. It wasn't just the job offer from the client that gave me that feeling, it was the fact that I had stood up for myself, that I had taken control of the situation when I could have just let it slide. It wasn't about the revenge. It was about integrity. It was about making sure the right person got the credit they deserved. I ran into Greg about a year later at a networking event. It was awkward, to say the least. He looked tired, like the weight of his actions had caught up to him. He was doing freelance consulting now, but no clients he could name. His reputation had taken a hit, and it was clear he was struggling to get back on his feet. When he saw me, he tried to put on that familiar, cocky smile. But it didn't work. Not anymore. No hard feelings, right? He asked, trying to make light of the situation. I just smiled back. It wasn't a smile of malice, just one of knowing. Of course not. Hope you're doing well, I said, keeping my tone even, neutral. It wasn't a moment of triumph, though. In fact, I felt a bit sorry for him. He had the skills, the charisma, the potential, but he had chosen to cut corners, to use people for his own gain. And in the end, it was that behavior that had caught up with him. Because here's the thing, revenge doesn't always have to be loud. It doesn't have to be about dramatic confrontations or making a scene. Sometimes, it's just about letting your work speak for itself. Letting your actions stand on their own. And when the time comes, making sure your name is on that work, because you earned it. Sometimes, the best revenge is success. And the truth? The truth always comes to light.
Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed these Reddit stories for deep sleep. If you did, consider liking the video, or subscribing if you would like to see more.